Okay, maybe he can't run as fast if you can't squeeze his arms together. Here's a look at McFarlane Toys' superpowers, the Flash. In a freak lab accident, forensic scientist Barry Allen was struck by lightning and doused with chemicals, which gave him superpowers of super speed. Now he uses these powers to defend his hometown of Central City from the forces of evil as the Flash. The reason, by the way, I mentioned squeezing his arms together was that the original Kenner Superpowers Flash had the feature, the gimmick, that you squeezed his arms together and Flash's legs would move back and forth. Now you know. What you may not also know is just how tall the figure stands. That's where I come in. If we take the tape measure right to the very top of Flash's head, then the figure stands, in fact, a little over 4 inches. He's about 4¼ inches in height, or the figure's about 10 centimeters tall. And to bring in a ton of other figures, actually it's only 4 other figures, but we're going to bring in either way, though. Other figures that we've already had a look at here on this channel. Here's what the Flash looks like next to the most recently looked at John Stewart Green Lantern. Just before that, we also had a look at the Batman Who Laughs. And if he's not going to fall over, let's just get him to properly stand here. And before that, we also had a look at both Batman, and we had a look at both Superman, bookend on either side with big giant capes. Now, when you look at the figures, I had mentioned, at least in the review of the Batman Who Laughs, that I thought he seemed a little smaller of a frame when you compared him to the rest of the figures. But you know, again, like, they're not really all supposed to be of the same size. Maybe like when you look at the characters like, say, for example, Joker from the original Kenner Superpowers, he wasn't obviously as big as a Batman. So obviously, when it comes to a character like the Batman Who Laughs, the bridging between the Joker and the Batman, yeah, you're not going to get a figure that's super muscular. But when, though, you compare a character like Flash, who's probably him and John Stewart, who looked to also be sharing like the same similar bodies, they're pretty muscular and they go quite well with both the Batman and the Superman we looked at before. Based on what you also saw at the beginning of this video, you may also believe that the figure comes included with a figure stand. No, it doesn't. However, though, if you happen to have yourself a DC Multiverse stand from any one of the figures we've looked at before, you can actually take Flash's feet, as he does have provided holes on the bottoms of his boots, and you can, in fact, attach it onto the display stand. So if you did want to have Flash more in a running pose, at least you can pull that off. Somewhat. At least you can actually have them attached onto a display stand. Figure doesn't obviously come with any other accessory. I mean, it doesn't come with any accessory, really, because I use this from my own Tickle Trunk collection. But, I mean, when it comes to a figure like Flash, maybe he didn't really necessarily needed anything. I mean, you know, when I did have a look at the Batman Who Laughs, I did say in his review that I wish he could have come included with, like, a mace or some weapon to wield in his hand. First of all, Flash, what are you really going to be giving him for an accessory anyways? A couple of lightning bolts? That's so yesterday. Also, too, this figure really wouldn't have had the function to actually hold weapons anyways, because if you look at the figure, both his hands are actually closed fists. Good for punching at lightning speeds. Getting, though, a closer look at the head sculpt. I had mentioned in the review of John Stewart that I left Flash for last because I thought he was going to be my favorite figure, but then I kind of corrected myself by saying already the two figures before, the Batman Who Laughs and the John Stewart, were superior looking sculpts. How could the Flash really top that? You know, now that I actually physically have this guy out of packaging and now in hand, he might actually be my favorite of the three. Fancy that. I end up looking at the last figure being also my favorite figure. I sort of suspected I was going to really like the Flash. I really like the original Superpowers Flash, and this one does things about the same as the original Kenner release. They have modernized, granted, the head sculpt, but not really enough that you would look at that and think it's a completely different line. This is a believable enough Flash that it would look like an extension from the original 80s Superpowers line, but they have, again, updated the head sculpt. The head sculpt looks, from what I can imagine, just only by memory alone, a little more chiseled. For example, Flash's face, about the still same. They haven't, like, colored in his eyeballs, for example, so things that are a little bit more simple are paint, like pupils, and only just, I guess that's his eyelids just above his pupils, but there's no really any additional white. Anything that would really have sold me right away on the idea that this is okay. This is like a DC Multiverse figure that's just shrunk down. This isn't the page puncher stuff that we're getting from McFarlane's team. Rather, instead, it's, again, like a very stylized looking Flash, simple on the articulation, but again, like, really delivers what I feel to be on good looking decorative details. One thing I really like about the Flash is the way they printed on the Flash logo. I don't suspect that this has likely been painted. Rather, it looks like it's also been probably just imaged or printed on the figure's plastic body. Most of the plastic on the Flash's body is all of sort of this, I don't want to describe it as solid red. It sort of has more of like a slight orangey tint to it. If I could best describe it as a color, I would say it's a ketchup red. Of course, he does have some nice yellow being used there on the sides of his sleeves, not to mention a big lightning bolt belt there that wraps around the whole diameter of his body. Some additional yellow also goes a long way for his boots. You know, like again, like paint's pretty clean on this figure. Not that there would be really a lot of paint happening here for Flash, but where there is paint, at least, it's handled quite well. He does have the lightning bolts. The things that are on the sides of his head here, the mask that he wears, is a softer plastic. I was actually surprised that they would have used such long lightning bolts on the back of his head, but, you know, got to say it like works quite well for the figure. Now, again, he doesn't have any features, any gimmick at least to him. The original Flash, if you would have squeezed the arms together, it would have basically moved the legs back and forth. I mean, you can obviously just do this with your hands, but it's going to look a little silly, especially if your friends are coming over and you're like, hold on, I'm going to be the Flash, running across, moving his legs about. But again, while he doesn't have any bit of the gimmick that would have made the original Kenner line so charming, you know, again, he does look like an extension to that original Kenner stuff. And maybe one of the reasons why I'm liking the superpower stuff we're getting so much now from McFarlane's team. For the articulation here on Flash, you're getting 7 points of articulation. That gives us a head, that gives us shoulders. Doesn't give us elbows, but at least it gives us the legs and the knees. So running through that, head is on a swivel joint. It's not on a ball joint, so you can't really move the head up and down, but it's just a swivel. Just be careful that you don't pinch these tiny little lightning bolts on the sides of his head. But yeah, it rotates all the way around. You can take the arms, and yeah, you can also rotate those also all the way around. When it comes to his legs, you can move them back and forth just on straight swivels, and you can also bend the knees as well. So you're getting 7 points of articulation, but that runs with the territory of all the other stuff that we got before. And even really, just to put Flash down and hope that he doesn't fall over. I keep bringing this guy back in for a comparison, but this is my original superpowers. The Kenner superpowers, Hal Jordan, drawing a complete blank. Missing, of course, the lantern, which is one thing I did almost entertain the idea of getting myself another superpowers John Stewart simply so I could use the lantern. I'm not going to do that. That's poor choices. But even like the original figures would have also had just a single hinge joint on the knees. So really, when you compare like a newer Flash to an older Lantern, an older Green Lantern, you know, again, like it looks like they are similar figures. I mean, obviously you can look at the two and know that the lines aren't exactly the same. I don't think you'd be going on eBay and find this guy and somebody's trying to sell you on the idea that this guy's an 80s Kenner Superpowers Flash. You would know right away that's clearly not the Flash from the original Superpowers days. But the newer stuff that we are getting still nonetheless from the McFarlane team, again, it brings me back to my childhood. It also brings me back to my childhood and reminding me that I only sadly had like 4 Superpowers figures. The Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, that we looked at and I brought in several times over these reviews. I also had a Red Tornado and I had a Martian Manhunter. Oh, and I also had a Firestorm too. So those were like essentially that made up the majority of my collectibles, my collection of Superpowers figures. Looking back on it now, I really wish that it was a line that I got more into instead of collecting just the G.I. Joes and just the Transformers. What I was normally doing is my bread and butter for collectibles back then. I do kind of wish that I could have gone back and I would have collected the Superpowers stuff because those were figures I would have still cherished to this day. We're getting sort of the next best thing. Instead of paying the ludicrous prices of what they're selling online over on eBay, instead, you can kind of get the next best thing, brand new figures from the folks over at McFarlane's team. Hopefully salvaging that dismal display of Flash on his display stand. This at least is a little bit more believable that Flash is in a running pose than what I did do earlier. Unfortunately, though, while the figures don't come included with display stands, if you happen to have yourself a tiny little drawer, and I'm describing it only because I'm looking at my drawer right now of tiny DC display stands, I have like literally an entire drawer full of these. Not a big drawer. Now we're not talking a sock drawer, but a tiny little plastic tote drawer. I've got just full of DC display stands. I've actually just used one because at least while these figures don't have the means to have stands with them, they have at least the same size holes on the bottoms of their feet. So yeah, you can use a stand if you have one available. I did want to use one at least that said DC on it and not one that had like Warhammer 40,000 because that would make absolutely no sense whatsoever. This is way I'm probably going to be displaying Flash on the shelf instead of just having him standing straight. But you know, really again, like with this line that I like so much is that they look like the original Kenner stuff that we're getting back in the 80s. Again, just only a reminder to me that I never really collect. I needed to get more into collecting these back in the day because I could have been still the person now that would have had a shoebox full of these figures. I have a couple of friends that actually have a whole line of Superpowers figures, and I'm so terribly envious of them. But this Flash really only has the same 7 points of articulation as the original stuff we were getting from Kenner. And really, when you think about it, something on those original Kenner Superpowers figures had to be sacrificed in order to accommodate a gimmick. So while it may seem on paper that they did have 7 points, shoulders, head, tops of the thighs, and of course the knees. Because you had to have something squeezable on the figures, whether it be the arms, whether it be the legs, one of those sets of limbs had to make the sacrifice, the greater good, in order to have a function being available. Because unfortunately, these figures don't have a gimmick included with them. They sort of, by that, inherit some additional articulation that wasn't on the original Kenner figures in the first place. But what do you guys think of Flash? Let me know down below in the comments section. I mean, again, like, I'm really loving this line so far. The only figure I have still picked up, but I haven't had yet the chance to review, is the Darkseid. So I'm going to have a look at him probably in a separate review. But is this something that you guys have been collecting? And what can you think of is a character you'd like to see be produced as a brand new DC, as part of the new McFarlane toys? I want to say DC Multiverse, but the new Superpowers figures. For me, right at the very top of the list, two of them, Joker and Harley Quinn. Yes, please. If you can get those two figures released, McFarlane team, release them as Superpowers figures, I'd be all the more happier. Just wish, though, that if you do release either one of the Joker or a Harley Quinn, or even both of them, have them come with some sort of accessories. A mallet, please. Please and thank you. That big mallet that Joker had in the original Kenners, where the nose was basically the handle, if you could just recreate that for the newer stuff that we're getting from the Superpowers line, please and thank you. But what do you guys think of Flash? And overall, what do you guys think of the Superpowers line? Let me know down below in the comment section. And as well, if you enjoyed this video, hit it with a like. If you're loving the content you guys are seeing and do certainly want to stick around for more, then make sure, if you haven't already done so, and here I go preaching about hitting subscribe and the bell notification. But you know, again, it honestly helps. It helps, first of all, this channel, but it also helps you to get the 411 of whenever new videos are posting. So yes, hit that subscribe button down below. Yes, turn on the bell notification. Yes, come back to this channel, because we are going to be looking at some more McFarlane stuff. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.